Okay, we're here, everyone. Just pretend we just got on. All right. Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna screen share where we're at today. And we've got a little bit of a roadmap. So this is our last subcommittee meeting. I wanted to be super clear about that. So congrats to us for making it through all of these super rich discussions in our prevention and intervention subcommittees. And so today we are going to wrap up our subcommittee discussions, and then our future meetings will all be full group. Some version of reviewing, wrestling with, giving, feedback to, recommendations, as we close in on the final report, which we will finalize by September 4th. So today we're going to stay in those same prevention and intervention groups. So if you were with me in prevention, you're going to stay with me. If you've been with Doris, you're going to stay with Doris, but they're kind of both more prevention conversations, for the most part. So if you feel super strongly about a group that you'd rather be in, feel free to hop over. Obviously, if everyone's in one, that makes it hard. So we would ideally prefer if folks could just kind of stick to their groups that they've been in. So group one with Doris is going to be discussing education on runaway prevention and safety planning. And then group two with me is going to be kind of looking at foster care considerations. And with that, we're really talking about the training of foster care parents, as it relates to all the content that we've been working through. Just realizing that, a lot of the times we've been talking through the lens of facilities. And we know that there need to be special considerations and thoughts and recommendations specifically around the experience and the training of foster care parents, and kin providers. So that's where that conversation is going to be happening. And then we'll leave today and we'll come back and July 31st. That's a big gap. So just wanted to name that for folks that we won't be back till the end of July. The other piece I wanted to just acknowledge is that before today, we thought that we were going to come back, and have we actually had added an hour to this meeting because we were going to be discussing recommendations from previous subcommittee conversations. We are not quite ready to do that yet. We're still working on the language piece of a number of those recommendations. There's some pretty technical stuff in there. So we're actually going to shorten the meeting today, back to the original 2 hours. And we will not be doing the review of recommendations yet. So we'll most likely be doing that starting in the July meeting, and some sort of back and forth via email and surveys. So just wanted to give a heads up to folks there, and I'm imagining that you won't mind having an hour back of your time this morning. Any comments or questions, or anybody from the planning team? Anything I'm forgetting? Okay, cool. All right, so what we are going to do is, if you are typically with Doris in the intervention group, so the education conversation, today you're going to hop to a different link that's about to be dropped in the chat. If you are with me typically in prevention for the foster care placement conversation, you are going to be sticking in this room. So for the folks, and then if you remember the public on here, you're welcome to go to either group. So you can either jump into the chat and click that link, or you can stick here with me for the foster care conversation. We're gonna come back at the 10. Oh wait, I'm in Arkansas. My time's messed up. We're gonna be coming back at 9:45. Yeah, 9:45 Mountain Time. Um, and we'll do public comment then as a full group. So appreciate folks making the effort to come back to the full group so we can respect members of the public time for public comment there. And then we'll be breaking at 10 o'clock today. Cool.
Grace, where would you like me to go? Which room am I going to?
Stacy, you're sticking with me. You're going to stay here.
Excellent. Okay.
All right.
Thank
So
you.
Stacy, Renee, and Jenna, you're on the panel with me. And then our other guests, you're going to be going with Doris. All right, so prevention group, if you're typically with me, you're sticking here. If you're with Doris, you're clicking the link that's in the chat. And we will see y'all back at 9:45. We'll give it just a minute, y'all. All right, perfect. Okay. All right, we had a few folks shake out to the other room. All right, super excited for this conversation today. This really, this conversation around considerations in foster care placement and like foster care training really came about. And just to remind you all, and also to the folks that we're going to be hearing from today, is that this group has been working for a little over a year and a half, and so many of the discussions naturally fall into the lens of facilities, and the unique challenges of youth who run from um, more facility placements. And then we have a number of folks both in the task force and also just by way of conversations that have said, there are different and unique considerations as it relates specifically to youth who run from foster home placements, obviously with kin providers as well, and the unique challenges of also when they return. So, there's so much protocol around when a youth returns to a facility. And I was just saying this morning to our group, I'm a foster parent, and I have had um, a 17-year-old runaway, and when she returned numerous times, I just anecdotally didn't know what to do. I was like, okay, welcome back. And then when she moved to Third Way, and was living in their kind of like transitional housing, and she ran from there, I realized, oh man, they had a whole protocol around, uh screening and asking questions and what did you experience and those sorts of things. And I didn't do any of those things. So it was just interesting for me to hear that just from my own anecdotal experience as a foster parent. And I think that's really the conversation that we're having today is like, um, you know, generally how foster parents are trained to handle youth who run from care, particularly what information and resources foster care providers are given about the dangers of run behavior, how to prevent runs, and what resources are available to foster care providers when a youth does run. Those are kind of some of the key things I think that we're wrestling with here. And really, I want to hear from, members of the task force today too. Once you hear from our panelists, what questions do you have? What gaps do you see? What conversations do you feel like we're not having? So that's kind of the like container I want to put us in today for what we're really getting at. But we've got a really great panel of Stacy, Renee, and Jenna. You're going to be joining us too. And so I want you all to first just introduce yourself. Actually, since it's a small group, I just want to introduce the folks so you know who you're talking with, that's on the task force. And then we'll have you introduce yourselves. And really, I want to give you all kind of, we sent these prompts to you ahead of time around what we're talking about. So just want to give you a chance to kind of do some like laying of the land of like, what's top of mind for you as it relates to these topics. And then I got a few key questions, and then we'll turn it over to, task force members to just kind of jump in and also kind of push and really get your expertise and experience here. So I'm just going to call on folks in the room real quick to do just a quick intro. So David Lee, go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. My name is David Lee. I'm the Western Region Director for the Division of Youth Services.
Thanks, David. Elizabeth.
Elizabeth Montoya. I'm Timothy Montoya's mother. And of course, he's who the task force is named after.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Renee.
Hello, I'm Renee Marquardt. I am the Chief Medical Officer for the Colorado Department of Human Services.
Becky.
Good morning, friends. Becky Miller Updike. I'm the Executive Director of CAFCA. That's Colorado Association of Family and Children's Agencies. Nice to see you all.
Brandon Miller.
I'm Brandon Miller, Executive Director at Southern Peaks.
Perfect. Ken, just since we're a small group, I believe you're a member of the public, but wanted to give you a chance to just introduce yourself real quick.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I wasn't able to get on the link until just a few minutes ago. I'm Ken Wynn. I'm a board certified behavior analyst, and work a lot with individuals in the foster care system with challenging behaviors, including running away. So just wanted to learn a little bit about what this task force does.
Great. Thanks, Ken, for being here. Stephanie, would you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning, friends. Stephanie Villaforte, Child Protection Ombudsman. Good to see you, Renee and Stacy. Thank you for joining us. And I'm just going to be off camera today, but still participating. I'm not feeling great, so thank you.
Perfect. Thanks. And then Addie and I are with the Keystone Policy Center. We've been the facilitators of this task force for the last year and a half. And so a couple of familiar faces. So nice to see you all and really appreciate you being here. Jenna, I'll go ahead and start with you since you're on the task force, but you're also doing the panel today. If you want to introduce yourself, and then Stacy will go to you, and then Renee will finish with you, and then we'll come back.
Sure. I'm Jenna Coleman. I'm the executive director here with SAFI in Fort Collins. We've got foster homes all the way down to Colorado Springs, though, so we're kind of spread out.
Thanks, Jenna. Stacy, go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Stacy Sanders. I'm the founder and executive director of Elevating Connections. We work with siblings that have been separated through foster care or out-of-home placement. And we also work with older youth who are aging out to help them find their voice and feel part of a community. Thanks for letting me be here today.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Stacy. And Stephanie, just so you know, Stacy came through Tori Schuler, who's doing some work with you all. So Stacy, appreciate you being here. Renee, go ahead.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for including me today. My name is Renee Bernhard. I was a foster parent in Adams County, and I am the founder and the executive director of Foster Source. Foster Source is a nonprofit. Oh, I'm being spotlighted. Okay, thank you, Trace.
I'm spotlighting all of y'all.
Foster Source is a nonprofit that serves foster and kinship parents statewide in Colorado with ongoing education, relief services. Those are hard goods like bunk beds, mattresses, car seats, and weighted items. And then therapeutic services. We pay for the foster or kinship parent to have a therapist. Our goal at Foster Source is if a child needs to be pulled into care, we want that child to remain in that first placement until they achieve permanency. So that's our goal, is really surrounding that placement and keeping it stable and hopefully helping maintain it.
Great. Thanks, Renee. Well, Renee, I'll start with you to kind of jump in, just since you were the last one to talk. So you got these kind of prompts from us, and I think as this group really wrestles with what are unique challenges we should be aware of and what sorts of recommendations might be coming out of a group like this around how foster parents are trained to handle youth who run from care. Curious, just to, I imagine you kind of prepared some thoughts. So I'm just going to hand it over to you to start us off, and then Stacy will head to you, and then Jenna as well, and then we'll kind of open it up for discussion.
Awesome. Thank you again for having us here. At Foster Source, lived experience is super duper important. I'm just making sure I'm not frozen. Am I frozen? No, good. Okay. So I'm really happy to be able to be here and speak on behalf of foster and kinship parents in Colorado. I did not have a child who ran when I was a foster parent. So we put this question out to our foster and kin families that we serve and got a few responses back. And I'm happy to share what they have shared. There are some common themes that have come back in everyone's response. The first is that there was little to no training on this in the original training to become a foster parent. I echo that. I really don't remember any training about it. And the next theme that is really prevalent is little to no support once it happens. And that I don't want to make it sound like the county doesn't do their job. I think there's just a lack of knowledge altogether around how to best support the child when this happens and how to best support the caregiver. Before it even gets to a situation of a run, we're seeing a lack of support way back before that, a lack of being able to get appropriate services in early on in a case, not being able to get a therapy match until months and months, if not years into a case. Little to no information about the background of the case, about the reason for removal, which some of this, we struggle with this on the daily at Foster Source. And some of these things are in statute, they're in law. You know, way back to 2018, House Bill 181348 made it so that foster parents can know the history of a case. We can know the reason for removal. We can know the background. We can know some diagnoses. But when these things pass, they often don't trickle all the way down. And so we have to teach foster parents to advocate and try to educate when we're being told, that is private. That is private. We can't tell you. What we always say at Foster Source is, the more we know, the better we can do. Foster parents want to do better. Foster parents want to be trained better. But until we're really included as a full member of the team, it's just not going to happen. I'll save a little bit of other information that I have for later, but I do have some information as far as how our seasoned foster parents have handled runs. And these are things that they've come up with. They have not been from the county. And listen, oftentimes it's evenings, it's weekends when kids run, and then we're dependent on whoever's answering the call center, right? Which, when I was a foster parent and called the call center, they weren't even sure if I could take my child to the hospital for an injury, right? They're not trained to be able to coach you through a run. I'll stop there for now in case there's any initial questions.
Renee, I was just going to jump in and say, you're getting right at the altitude that we need to, this group is making policy recommendations, right? And so it's interesting to hear from you that's like, listen, there have been some things that have passed and they don't trickle down.
Yeah.
So the conversation that, that doesn't mean that the conversation is squarely in that space, but it's an interesting point that, like, it's not just, hey guys, no one's been thinking about this and we need some policy recommendations. It's like, yeah. So it sounds like the gap really is not necessarily always at the policy level. It's that wherever the implementation is happening, that there's a real disconnect there. Is that a fair way to summarize what you're saying?
Absolutely. And again, caseworkers are doing their best as well, but there's so much vicarious trauma within child welfare workers and a lack of support there that it feels like musical chairs at the county. So even within your case, you've got 3, 4, 5 caseworkers by the time the case ends, and just not having that continuity of services. Hopefully the caregiver, the foster parent, is the same, but sometimes that's, again, it just can't be the case.
Yeah. So, Stacey, I want to come to you, but Renee, I think the thing I want you to be kind of thinking about is like the so what question, right? So I think you've done a good job of just raising, like, okay, from our perspective, here's some unique challenges that might be solved by better policy, right? And there are some unique challenges beyond the policy piece and the implementation side. So want to just kind of on those two pieces, kind of ask around the so what. Brandon, did you have a question? And then Stacey, I'm going to come over to you. Go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, it's just a quick question, just so I understand. I'm not as familiar with the foster care, how it's set up. Is it the county and caseworkers is supposed to be responsible for all those things you were talking about, or is it like the CPA, the agency? Like I'm not sure who's I guess responsible for providing those support services currently in the models we have.
The support services would be your county or CPA. That initial training is whoever you go through to be trained. Normally the county, and Jenny, you can speak from the CPA side. But there's so much to learn in that initial training that it is really, really hard to cover everything in every situation, in every scenario. And frankly, one of the foster parents that I thought this was really interesting put in there, and they're probably right, they don't talk about it because they're afraid it will scare parents off. And I agree with that. Foster parenting is hard and it's scary, and it's really hard to recruit foster parents. So there's a balance between this could happen and, you know, it may not, and just trying to not scare people away from being a foster parent.
Yeah, thanks, Renee. Stacy, I want to come over to you. You know, I saw some head nods around what Renee was outlining, but again, kind of remind us of the perspective with your organization and kind of your experience, like that you're kind of, you know, the angle you're coming from here on the considerations. But yeah, what are the unique challenges that you want folks to be aware of as it relates to the training of foster parents and the support?
I relate to Renee a lot. We are good partners and work together a lot to train foster parents in the sibling relationship, and we're foster source. So I'm nodding because we're in agreement on all of those things that she talked about. So my perspective, I've been in child welfare for 13 years, and that entire time, 10 years of that working at CASA in Arapahoe County, Douglas, Elbert, and Lincoln, and also at the same time building Elevating Connections. And Elevating Connections is purpose is to support the sibling relationship, but support the families who have the kids who are separated. And we create a sense of belonging and community for all the youth that we work with, and nobody ages out of my program. So if you've got a 21-year-old who doesn't feel ready to be on their own, which I didn't feel ready when I was 21, then they have a place to connect and come together. And my perspective is that sense of belonging. And so when we talk about the sibling relationship, and I have conversations with foster parents constantly throughout my career, but one recently is yesterday, who watched a training I did for Foster Source and has sibling separation issues going on that should not be happening, simply should not be happening. And so fortunately her kids are too little to run. But what I can tell you is that when the youth run, the kids run somewhere, they're running for a sense of belonging. They're running to their siblings. They might be running to family members. They could be running back to friends that make them feel welcome, even though they're not the healthiest people in the world to be around. They're going for a sense of belonging. And when it comes to the laws that are passed and in the books not being followed well, the Sibling Bill of Rights that was passed in 2019 is a glaring example of that, to the point that created a task force that's starting up here in the next month to address this across the board. And when I say it's not being addressed properly, I'm talking about judges not understanding the law, guardians ad litem, caseworkers not understanding the law, administrators not understanding, and it's a simple law. It's one of the easiest ones on the books. So we don't need to go back to the legislature for this one. We need to understand it better. And if the sibling relationship, if kids are separated from their siblings from the beginning or at any time during the case, priority must be given to that relationship, because kids will tell me, I need to know what's happening with my siblings before they want to know what's happening with their parents. So this is about belonging and having a sense of family. And when we cut them off and say, you can't see your sibling because of A, B, C, and sometimes they don't even get a reason, where are they going to go first? Who are they going to reach out to? They're going to go on social media, and they're not supposed to. They're going to go meet their siblings someplace they're not supposed to be. Some of the siblings could still be with bio family, and the kid that's been removed isn't supposed to be there. So what we're setting up for foster parents and kin providers from the beginning is not setting the expectation that the sibling relationship has to be a priority, the sense of belonging to their family. They're going to want to have a relationship with their family. And what the system does, because we are trying to protect them, at least physically, is saying you can't, because it's not safe. And instead of saying, here's what we're going to do to try and mitigate, and helping the foster parents understand how to do that. Every foster parent I talk to almost across the board is figuring out how to do it by piecemeal. So talking to resources, foster source, me, their caseworker, the guardian ad litem, and trying to put together a plan of action for kids without getting collaborative support across the board from all the parties that are here for the kids. And the decisions that we make and the lack of training for foster parents, or the decision for sorry, my cat came to participate, to separate the siblings and cut them off and say you can't see them right now, which is not goes against the law that it has been put into action, into the books, is we're saying that your needs don't matter as much. And so they're going to take it into their own hands and say, this is what I need. No one's listening to me. And that's part of why some of the youth run. Some run because they don't like the rules in the house, and some of the rules are made for their safety. So it's a conversation about there are rules to be followed, and let's see what we can do on this front to try and get you contact or whatnot. So I feel very strongly that no matter how fabulous the foster parents are, and there are so many fabulous foster parents out there, and kin providers who want to do it well, if they're not taught how to foster the sibling relationship or the relationships that are important to the kids that are hopefully safe for them, they're going to run. They're going to have behavior problems. They're going to be truant. All the things I can give you research after research study saying that if we don't support these key relationships, and the sibling relationship being the longest one most of us are ever going to have, we are going to have long-term consequences for that. And it's placement changes, and it's hard on the foster families, and it's hard on the kids. And so we are causing lifelong harm to the kids when we don't give them that belonging to their family and to their siblings. So they're going to find their parents. They're going to do the things they want to do. I'm working with a family who's got 5 kids, and they're all adopted out into separate homes. And one of them started having a relationship again with his mom, which is not great for him, but he hid it from his adopted dads because he didn't think they'd like it. And so the conversation I had with those dads is, he's going to do it. And he's at an age now where he's trying to figure out, how did I end up in this situation? I was 7 years old when I was removed from my home. I'm separated from my siblings. How did I get here? And the person who can answer that in his mind is his mom, and she's not going to have the answers. So they flipped the switch when I talked with them and said, okay, we're going to give him the opportunity to explain why, and we're going to do this in a safe way. And so the results of that was he's still home, and didn't run to go see his mom. So I will stop there.
Yeah. No, Stacy, I appreciate it. I mean, I think you're just talking about, again, the importance of you're giving the examples of, like, there's a lot of fantastic foster parents and kin providers out there, and like training and knowledge and understanding and navigation of resources, et cetera, is a very real challenge regardless of intent, right? So someone can have the right intent of, like, I want to help this child, and not have the information they need to be able to do that well, given their unique circumstances. And it sounds like the sibling relationship is a key part of that for a lot of these kids. So I appreciate you elevating that, if you will, no pun intended, with your sure.
And if I could throw in one thing,
throw in one thing, and then Jenna, I want to come to you. Yeah, please.
Is that what we don't train foster parents and some adoptive parents well on is the impact that's going to happen in their family if they cut them off from siblings. And it's not a question of if, it will come back in some form to either ruin that relationship, a failed adoption, no connection after the kids turn 18, it never goes well. And so we need to do a better job on this side of adoption before it happens, to educate and say, here's your resources, here's how you can support the sibling relationship. And if you choose not to, here are the potential consequences. So, okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Stacy. Jenna, I want to bring you in. You know, again, as it relates to the training and the needs and the where are there disconnects and what needs to be happening, what does this group really need to be pushing forward to better support, you know, foster parents and kin providers? What's top of mind for you?
Yeah, so I can kind of lay out, I took notes just because we've got kind of a lot of things. I will try not to go too long. So kind of at the beginning as a CPA, we, you know, as you guys spoke about, we get placement packets on kids. So we do try and get as much information. And we always tell our parents, just because you don't see it on paper does not mean it's going to happen. So we pay a lot of attention if a child comes in with running behaviors, and or if they're a teen, because if a teen gets pissed, guess what? They're just going to leave. So they might never call that AWOL because they're not gone for a long time, but they might just leave. So we talk a lot about that with families. The initial things that we'll encourage families to put into their homes and that will provide, you know, financial support for is door chimes. We can get the really loud, annoying ones, so they can be put on all the house doors, all the bedroom doors, windows. No kid is ever locked in. That's not okay. We educate our families on that. But that's just a simple thing that's going to wake you guys up if the child tries to leave. So that's definitely something we do. Talking about, sorry, I guess I jumped ahead. So talking about kind of our training, when we are training our families, there's a whole section on policies and procedures. And as you guys know, there's a lot of policies and a lot of procedures just in foster care. So it's not always hit as hard in those moments. However, the one thing that we teach our families consistently is you call on call. So those are our staff 24/7, 365. There's only 11 of us. I mean, that's just, they know who we are. So whether they're in the foster care program or they work for our other program, these families get to know, you know, our voices. We pick up within 2 rings. Like it's very, they can get us any time of day, any hour. And so they are trained. The first thing you do is pick up the phone because your staff are going to be able to walk you through what that procedure is going to look like. So our procedures are somewhat similar, but they will also just depend on the child, right? It also depends on Colorado weather. If it is -30 degrees out and a kid is left, we're not going to give them a 4-hour window. You're going to call the police right now and you're going to go and try and look for them. If it's a hot summer night, like last night in 70 and they took off and they're like, no, I'm going to go play some basketball. We're like, let's give it a little bit of time. Let's see, maybe drive by the park. So we have all of those kind of procedures laid out. We also have something we call hotspots in a shared online notebook. And so our staff can go in there very quickly if it's a new case, or say if they work for our other program, not foster care, and they're like, I'm not sure how this family responds. I'm not sure how this kid's going to respond. There's like notes in there that shows like, this kid's a habitual runner. They run to the park for 2 hours and they always come back. Okay, we've got some idea of what we need to do with this. So, hey, foster parents, I know you're new. Do you remember that they said that they always like to run to the park because they meet friends there and they get high, but they're going to come home? Okay, let's go to the park and see if we can find the kiddo and get him home before he gets high, right? So we're kind of looking at all of those things. But like I said, I think that can get really detailed per kid, but our overall kind of protocol stays the same. Call on call. We're going to help direct you when we need to call the police, when we need to notify the caseworker. So there's those pieces. And if you guys have more specific questions on kind of those hours and things like that, we can talk about that. The other thing that we do is kids that are habitual runners, and our families are prepared to take these kids, because we have some families that go, AWOL doesn't bother me and I'm prepared to handle it. They'll do a lot of, and again, we'll do this with any kid that we can, a lot of education on what's really scary about running. As we know, teenagers think they're invincible. And so they're like, yeah. But we're like, still give them that education. We talk about sex trafficking. We talk about, you know, you want to go get high, but what if it's laced with something and that becomes really scary? And all of a sudden you start to feel woozy in a park and you're left by yourself, because are these really your friends, right? So we talk about those things, and we talk about those things with the kids and with the caregivers. if a child still says, because sometimes we have teens that they're like, I'm going to run now. Thanks for the heads up. If you're going to run tonight, you got to have shoes on. It's cold out. It's not -30, but it's 45 and maybe going to snow tonight. I need you to bring a coat. I'm going to give you a cell phone. Okay. You're going to call me. You can also go to these other 2 foster parents that are in our neighborhood. So if you're super sick of me or you're super sick of your foster brother, go to their house. They're going to let you come in. I'm going to give them a heads up. They're not going to ask any questions. You can go anytime tonight. So we'll do some harm reduction. Does that always work? No, but for some it does. And for some, if we say, take a coat, take a snack, take a water bottle, they go, what? You're okay with me leaving? We're like, we can't stop you. We're not going to put our hands on you. We want you to be safe. Now, if you get somewhere and you want to call me at 3 a.m, you want me to pick you up, guess what? No questions asked. I'm going to come pick you up, but you got to call me. So there's a lot of kind of those things that we have to educate parents on, because parents are sometimes like, I'm not going to let them out of my house. We're like, well, you put hands on them. They can notify you if they're going to leave. You can do some harm reduction, and then we can do a lot of different things when they come back to try and help prevent this from happening again. So then when they do come back and we have these runners, I think I've shared with some of you guys that we're working with the University of Southern Florida, and they are working on research to see if this thing called a FAIR assessment is going to be helpful to prevent kids running. What's really interesting is that since SAFE is nationwide, us in South Carolina, our programs have trained our staff in FAIR, and our AWOLs have decreased, and our other states have not done this yet, and they have continued to increase. So they first picked Colorado and South Carolina because we had the highest compared to our other 7 states. Now we have the lowest, and we've seen a reduction. So we know that this is working. And I think a big thing that this assessment comes out of is we're getting to the why these kids are running. So Stacey, I think you bring a fabulous point. They are running for belonging, gang involvement, that's belonging. Sibling involvement, that's belonging. Nope, you're never going to see your mom again because her rights are terminated. Okay, I'm going to go run and see mom. So if we can figure out why they're running, we can start to talk to caseworkers and go, okay, you terminated mom's rights. This kid wants to see mom. How can we make this work? How can we figure this out? Obviously, if they're super unsafe, we can't do those things, but we're going to try and figure out the why. A lot of times they're running because they want to go use, right? Okay, so they're going to need some substance abuse treatment. We've got to figure out how to get them sober so they're not craving that anymore. And what are some other things that they enjoy when they're on the run that we can tap into that are actually positive? Sometimes kids are like, I love to go walk around the mall. No one's bothering me. Okay, I can take you to the mall every Saturday and I'm not going to bother you. As long as you'll meet me back here in 3 hours, I'll even give you money if you stay at the mall, right? So we're figuring out really what's the root cause for them leaving. So I'd say those are kind of our biggest things that we do here at SAFE to try and help prevent it. If it's inevitable, we're trying to do some of that harm reduction. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, it's super helpful. I really appreciate that, Jenna. I think it's a call out too of like, yeah, SAFE doing some, sounds like best practices of like the why piece. And then my question is, okay, so what if I am not a foster parent connected to SAFE? Like, are those, right? Like, what's my likelihood of getting a similar level of training? It sounds like you all are doing some really strong practice work, but what are the odds there? And like, what would this group really want to, knowing that these best practices exist in pockets, right? How can we ensure that like, if I'm a foster parent or kin provider anywhere in the state of Colorado, that I have access to these high quality trainings and support? And I don't have to go find them. It's like provided to me as a baseline, I want to, I'm throwing a little bit of a pivot here because we have Ken Wynn here, who I believe Dennis connected you to this group. I remember your name in my inbox, and I was saying, typically we don't bring in a member of the public into the panel, but we were trying to find folks for this panel. So I love that you're here. And I just would be curious, Ken, if you could share a little bit about this, and just stay kind of high level for me. Just take a couple minutes about this behavior analysis service project in Florida. I'm curious if you could just share a little bit about that. It sounds like it was in service of helping. And again, this group is particularly focused on youth who are running. So I want to keep it in that kind of container around the challenges of a run and then also the return. Tell us a little bit about your project, if you don't mind. And yeah, I'll hand it to you.
Great. I just really want to learn about what you guys did. Dennis had mentioned it. I'm very familiar with, what happened to your son Ms. Montoya, and I was working at Firefly Autism at the time, and we had a relationship with Tennyson at the time. And this is a particular challenging issue around the board in terms of right restrictions versus safety. So in the 90s, we had implemented, because I worked in the foster care system in Florida, and so we have a very strong behavior analysis system there. That's where the the professional program started. So we saw the need to do a different level of training for foster parents, and it was extremely successful. So for about 10 years, there were 75 behavior analysts throughout the state of Florida that worked with the CBCs, the community-based care, which is the foster care system in Florida. And we had, so the three areas that we looked at in terms of outcome included illicit drug use, police involvement, and runaways. So if I put in the chat the article from the research on social work that describes that system, they still use it in Florida. It's not the system that it was, because it was through the Department of Children and Families. Now the individual CBCs contract with behavior analysts to provide that. So we hit on several different levels. One was the training, as you guys mentioned. So at the time, there was a required training that all the foster care parents in Florida had to go through that training. Now it's through the community-based care system. So each CBC can contract directly with the foster parents that they provide foster care for. And then we had, and I'm so glad you mentioned the USF program. So the USF program, which I worked with Kim Crossland at the USF program, they continue to do this. She helped develop that system of training. So we provided not only the training, but also individual-based services. Because I think, as you guys mentioned, the need to understand the individual motivations. What's motivating to leave either long-term or short-term the foster care, the foster parents that they're living with, to experience access to their previous social supports, the use of drugs or things of that nature. So we not only provided training, but we provided individual supports for the foster parents.
Perfect. Thanks, Ken. I appreciate you just kind of jumping in. I know I put you on the spot, but the more the merrier as it relates to what's out there, what are some best practices, what are folks doing, and really what should this group be honing in on as it relates to the support of our foster parents and more importantly for the kids in their care, right? So just to really appreciate your willingness to jump in. I want to Renee, go ahead, jump in. I want to ask after this kind of the so what question, right? So what are you saying? What's the crux here for the need, the challenge, around these recommendations? I mean, we have an hour to really get at so what are you saying? What do you ask? What would you ask for, right? What would you like to see if you wave the wand and you're here's what happens as far as the supports provided, the training, and we know that it's not all just a training answer, right? I think that's the thing that I hear a lot in this group, is that it's not just we need more training. It's that, and I'm guessing and so what are some creative things that you all are thinking about or doing? Obviously, Jenna, you're kind of working in a in the safety kind of bubble of what you all can do, but what when we're thinking about systems wide policies and really what we'd like to see for all providers across the state, that's what I want you all to kind of be thinking about. And then I want to make sure that folks in on the task force, that you all can ask some questions too. So Renee, jump in, and then I want to make sure we don't have any questions from the task force before we kind of get to this so what and start wrestling with that.
Yeah, I just want to point out, I think a lot of it does begin at that training level. What Jenna described is a training level at a therapeutic or treatment level, and likely, Jenna, for your traditional families as well. But for the most part, traditional foster parents are not getting that additional layer of training. And that's the difference. And this is still, we're still feeling the effects from Family First, where a lot of these high acuity kids stepped down into traditional foster homes. So when we are placing a high acuity kiddo in a brand new, very green foster family, it is not going to work. So we've got, I love what Jenna's doing. I love how they're training, and that needs to be across the board. That's the only way it's going to work. And then beyond that, that support. And I think it was Stacy who mentioned connection. And I love that, because that is the number one theme at Foster Source that comes back from our caregivers when we do our evaluation and our surveying. The number one thing foster parents and kinship parents are looking for is connection with other foster and kinship parents, because every foster and kin parent feels like they're doing a horrible job, feels like they are failing the child, and feels like they are doing more harm than good. So when we can connect them with other families walking that same walk, and they can really start to validate and wrap around each other, that support is so important. I'll stop for now because I know we're going to jump into the what now, but that's kind of the direction we're headed at Foster Source.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks, Renee. So I'm hearing kind of, and I actually appreciate your kind of call out and push on, like, it actually does start at the training level, because a lot of times in our task force, this one in our mandatory reporting task force, when we talk about like at the professional level, so a caseworker and whatnot, people kind of say it's not always additional training or additional paperwork or additional whatever, right? There's all these other things that were happening. But you're like, listen, the baseline training often is not happening for foster parents. At least it sounds like in a consistent manner. So I actually think this is a little bit of a differentiator between some of the professional supports we give to folks in the field versus, and I mean like professional median, your professional foster parent, but like professional, like licensed caseworker, right? Whose job this is, and then a foster parent who's like maybe getting great training and maybe not, depending on where you live, depending on what access you have, et cetera. So I appreciate that kind of like differentiator there. Jenna, jump in. What were you gonna say?
Yeah, so I just want to make sure there's clarification, I think just for me too, on the training. So there's training for what you do when a child AWOLs, and then there's the prevention training. That's why I joined the prevention side, because that's really important to me. And so a lot of that comes from de-escalation training, right? So like, don't sit there and pester a kid. Don't sit there and follow them around the house. Don't record their blowups. Those are that behavioral training that we have to give our families to say, what do you do when they start to escalate? Because yes, a kid can just walk out of the house when they're calm. And if they feel, there's that word again, connection in that family, they don't feel like they're going to be pestered for everything. Yes, they do have to do chores, but I think there's a lot of trauma-informed training that I think we all are saying that could be spread across, all of our facilities, to get to that first piece of prevention, and then the training for AWOL. And the prevention pieces, like we've talked about, like I think it's Brandon, they use lasers outside to like that alert the staff. It's the same kind of thing. So I think we have to look at when we say training, what kind of training specifically. So I think there's the two types of trainings. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, so I'll still call it then just like the prevention intervention side. Is that fair, kind of general what we're saying? Just, yeah. Okay. Stacy, did you want to jump in and add to any of this piece before we kind of move into this so what? And also,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and if folks have questions too from the task force side, would welcome those. Just raise your digital hand, if you will.
I do
Go
think
ahead, Stacy.
most of what I have to say is the next piece and training. And I think, so as I'm starting to think about what I was going to say, it's the so what I have to say next. So actually I'll wait. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any questions about what folks have shared from task force members before I kind of move this into this next?
Yeah, Trace.
Yeah, please.
Brandon. Just a quick question to the group. So is the issue funding, or is it the issue of the resources, or both? to not be able to accomplish these things?
From my perspective, I think it's lack of awareness. And so it's of what's available and what's expected. Both on the side of foster parents and kin providers, but also on the side of the professional teams who don't know the training necessarily that the foster parents are getting. And so there's different rules with each department and things like that. So consistency. So I personally think it's a lack of awareness to all of this and where to turn.
Is that because of the infrastructure and the way it's set up, the system, and it's like too chaotic, and how the infrastructure is set up, like who's in charge, who's responsible for what, versus anything else?
I think just so being a nonprofit that works with all of the stakeholders, so CPAs, departments, GALs, CASA, everybody, care providers, what it is, I'm going to be really direct. It's silos.
Yeah.
And everybody that works in the system, no matter where they work, comes to the table with a desire to help these families. And so it's who takes responsibility for this piece and this piece and this piece and this piece, instead of creating, and this goes into the so what, a collaborative training across the state, from my perspective.
And remember, Colorado is state-run, county administered, right? For foster care.
Yeah.
So we have 64 different foster care systems in Colorado, and
Yeah.
families are taking cases in different counties, and the procedure is different in each county. The policies are different in each county. So there's not consistency across the board.
Thanks for that. Jenna, why don't you add in your comments, and then Stephanie will come to you with the question.
Yeah, I was just going to say really quickly to Brandon's point, I think the other thing is, and someone had said this at the beginning, there's so much stuff that we have to tell our foster parents, and there's so much stuff that you probably are training your staff on, that it's just one piece of it, right? Like, okay, so we're going to train you in AWOL, we're going to train you on drug use, we're going to train you on this. And it seems like there needs to be just more light shed on like a whole real training dedicated to AWOL, all the way from prevention to what to do when they do go. I just think it gets lost. I mean, when you look at volume 7, our families have to know volume 7. We have to know volume 7. So we're keeping kids safe and we're not breaking any rules, right?
Yep. Thanks, Jenna. Stephanie, go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, I think all my questions were just answered, but just to confirm, so there is no standard foster care training statewide, correct? Am I hearing?
On AWOL, no. There is Presley Ridge, which Safi does, and they're starting to maybe say that that's going to become a statewide training, but they are not there yet. That's the pre-service training for families.
Okay, but there is there is no current standardized training for foster parents then. Period. And then on the AWOL component as well. In other words, we just have nothing standard.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And my other question to all of you is, are you familiar with counties or aware of counties that you believe may be more advanced in handling particularly this issue of AWOLs or even prevention of running?
I'll just speak to my experience. It depends on the county's police or sheriff who are on. That's it. So a caseworker, it's going to depend if they answer, if it's after hours. It really depends on the response of the police if we have to get them involved, if that makes sense. That's been our experience.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think that, and Stephanie, you're kind of getting at exactly what I'm kind of drawing out too, I think, which is this lack of, and I think Renee, that's what you were kind of saying, like, there's not we've got, what'd you say? We've got 64, foster care agencies, right? If you look at it that way. And so of course, you're going to have some inconsistencies here. And you think about families that are taking kids in different counties. You think about kids that are moving into different counties. You know, I had a teenager who started in Douglas County and ended in Adams County, and even they were unaware of, for their own advocacy, you know, like what was available to them as a youth who was aging out of foster care. So I would love to just kind of start with this so what question. And Renee, I want to kind of start with you. You know, I think I'm going to start with you. So what? So what are we going to do? What do you want to do? What would you love to see?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, again, I'm speaking on the foster or kinship parent perspective. So we definitely need foster and kinship parents connecting, which is what we work on at Foster Source. But beyond that, we have to change our perception of foster and kinship parents. We are not the villain. We are all working for the same good here. And we've got to empower the foster and kinship parents to really advocate for the child. If you've listened to the legislative session, the last couple of sessions, it has been very brutal for foster parents. We have been dragged through the mud, and it's hard to recruit. We don't recruit at Foster Source, but foster parents are constantly told we should not speak. The Foster Parent Bill of Rights says a foster parent has a right to be heard. Yep. Every single court date I attended, I asked to speak and was denied. No one wants to hear from the foster parent. There is a narrative, a false narrative, that foster parents just want to adopt Black and brown babies away from their families. That is simply not true for the vast, vast, vast majority of foster and kinship parents. That is not what hits the press. And that is why that is the main thing we struggle with at Foster Source, is fighting these false narratives. Foster parents are savvy. They are educated. They are pro reunification. They want to work with the biological families. Often the counties don't let us work with the biological families. They don't even let us connect with the biological family. So we have to empower our foster and kinship parents to really be a part of the team and trust them. Foster and kinship parents, like I said before, they want to do better. They are here to serve the family. They are here to help make reunification happen. But if the 24/7 caregiver is being disregarded and not included, that can't happen. It can't happen.
Thanks, Renee. I appreciate that. Stacy, and then Jenna will come to you. We're asking this question, you know, again, as it relates to what do foster parents need? What recommendations would you like to see coming out of this? Yeah, so what? What's the so what for you?
And I want to piggyback again off what Renee said, is that foster parents, by us not considering what the foster parents have to say and hearing from them, we are disregarding what's happening with the kids right now. And they know them better than anybody at this moment in time. And so in terms of training, my dream is that at every single shelter hearing and then intake, first family meeting, whatever it is, there's a checklist that every single caseworker goes through with the family, that includes going over what sibling contact looks like, what parent-child contact is going to look like. Are they in school? Do they have extracurriculars? What are the things that the family needs to consider right away to try and keep the kids regulated and make the transition as smooth as it can be under the circumstances, so that there's universal language being used across the board, that for these kids, sibling contact will happen, parent-child contact will happen, and they will not necessarily happen at the same time. Whatever needs of the kids, were they in the school choir at the school they were at, then let's get them in the school choir at the new school that they're at. How do we support these kids and who they are, and make that transition easier, because then it's easier for the foster parents and easier for the kin provider. One of the things that I would also love to see, and we tried to do this at CASA because there's so much information, again, that we've talked about, is that after initial foster parent training and they've gotten their first placement, that there's follow-up trainings, very like a plan of the next training is going to be on how to prevent runaways. It's going to be what you do if your kid starts using drugs. What do they do if they want to see people that they weren't allowed to see? Whatever the challenges are, that every foster parent, their continuing ed is learning more about those topics they already learned in training, but really hone in on those, the ones that we're seeing consistently. And the other thing, we're piloting, hopefully in the fall, if not in the spring, a support group for foster parents who have and kin providers who have separated siblings. So getting the families to work together and feel connected over those kids. And one of our challenges that we face is, and I think training on this as well for kin providers in particular, is you may be mad at the mom because you think mom is the one who got your son in trouble, and then the kids are set, whatever the reason is, getting them to get past that and work together for the kids is something that we're hoping to try and do. Some of that connection, some of understanding the needs of the kids and what they've gone through, and supporting the care providers in a way that's meaningful to them.
Thanks, Stacy. Brandon, jump in, and then Jen, I'm going to come to you, and then I've got some other follow-up questions.
Yeah, so it sounds a lot like some of the problems that we're dealing with on the direct service care providers. Like, the job in itself has become so complex, and we're asking, these individuals that are, normal people out there that just care about the situation to become clinicians and become crisis responders. And so one of the things I'm toying around with my facility is like, how do I take the complexity of the job and get the direct care person back to just paying attention to the kid, giving them support, working with them, being a mentor, and supporting them and defining that to where we don't add the complexities to it, and we create these, expert lanes that can actually help them. Like, so obviously they're going to be involved, the direct care person, but the person that is like running like meds and delivery of meds isn't the direct care person anymore. It's this person, and they're just there to support. I wonder like how much, in some of these like the AWOL stuff, the running, that if you start building an infrastructure that the experts are there to facilitate that and help prevention and help and like make that happen with the foster care families, so they're not just relied on, rather than just constantly trying to educate them at a level that would take years for them to be able to manage some of these kids. Because the kids are, in my opinion, today are becoming so complex, and the issues are becoming so complex that you almost need a PhD in every lane that you're providing, and years of experience. So just a thought that's been, as you guys are talking, that trying to really identify some of the jobs they have that shouldn't like really fall on them, and how do we create lanes that are handling that for them, rather than that they have to be relied on. Because I think training can only take you so far. Like, I mean, we can train them all the time, and it's just going to take years before they get to that point in certain aspects. And then that, depresses who you can put in there, because only a few people can handle those type of kids. And I think that's the difficulty of the field. I don't know. That's just my opinion.
So go ahead. Go ahead, Stacy.
I think one of the things is when they focus on that kid and that kid's needs, and then when they speak up, the care provider or the direct service provider or whoever, and say, this is what the kid's telling me. Their behavior is telling me this. Their words are telling me this. And making sure that adult is heard by the team and the decision makers and the people who are surrounding this kid. Because I think foster parents get poo-pooed, sometimes CASAs get poo-pooed, and they don't know what they're talking about because we're the professionals. Well, what I like to tell my volunteers, like we run a summer camp for kids and so for siblings, and we get behaviors at camp, and these aren't behaviors that are going to send kids home. These are what we need to do is listen to the behavior and observe the behavior. They're telling us what they need. And then the next piece of that is making sure that we are heard by the adults in their lives who are making the decisions. So I think part of it is just making sure everybody's heard, and focusing on that kid. When you have a sibling group of kids, or, you know, there's 4 or 5 kids, their behaviors become their identifiers. So this one is ADD, this one has anger issues, and the kids will say it back to you. So looking at the kid, giving everyone the ability and the permission to look at each kid as an individual, and then across the board, we need to listen to each other, with whoever's working with those kids, saying, this is what they're telling me. Their behavior is this. I'm not kicking them out of my house because they're slamming doors and running, but they're telling me something because they run the same place. So hopefully that made sense. It's just really honing in on that child and then making sure that everyone's voice is heard for that child.
Thanks, Stacy. I want to pull us up to this kind of, as this group considers specific recommendations piece. You know, there could be a recommendation around obviously this standardized training piece. And so I don't want to get us too lost in the like, so then what does that standardized training include? More like, what are we actually asking at a system level of like, what would that even look like? So Brandon, I think your point is really helpful as far as like, it's almost like you're looking at like a company and you're saying, okay, we're going to be more efficient in what we do. And we're going to start with knowing what your job is and knowing what your job is not. Right. And so some of that comes from also needed clarification at the system level of who's doing what in the system, right? Before you tell a foster parent what they can, what they do, and what they would then call in. Because it's kind of like, well, do we even know what resources are available to foster parents and where to send them, right? And then we have to look at, okay, well, you live in X county, you live in Y county. So I want to just ask the question around this idea of making things more standardized, given the unique challenges of Colorado. That seems to be kind of what we're dancing around here. And so, Renee, I want to start with you. Like, what would that, like, given your understanding of the landscape of Colorado, the 64, you know, different, like all the things that you kind of pointed at, like, what do you think that could look like? And what specifically do you want to, you know, like, what recommendations would you make around something like that happening? Like, I'm a foster parent. I get certified by my county, you know, and what happens to me? You know, like what would you wish for every foster parent?
Well, what I wish after hearing everyone today, I had as a foster parent is exactly what Jenna described, is a network of people I could call whom I knew. We did not have that. When we called the hotline, not the hotline, but like our county's on-call person, oftentimes they weren't even in child welfare. Like it and it's midnight and you just feel helpless. So maybe we could consider some kind of standardized support number where you would reach someone who really knows what to do. That would have been amazing. I would have loved that. I didn't know about CPAs when I fostered. I thought if you want to foster, you call the county. So that's what I did. But after today, if I had known of SAFI, I would have fostered for SAFI 100%. Like that's what parents need, is that support.
Yeah. Okay, so the support piece is a standardized support piece of like, regardless of my situation with my kid, I'm living in an urban environment, I'm living in a rural environment. My kid is
Yeah.
17, my kid is 8, I'm their 10th home, I'm their first home, right? I have some sort of resource that's able to wrap their hands around me just from a resource perspective to say, I can't remember who it said. I think it was you, Renee, that said, like, I didn't even know if my kid could go to the hospital.
Right.
Was I legally allowed to do that? Right. Like, so some of those questions, because it's 10 o'clock on a Saturday night and you can't get a hold of your caseworker, you can't get a hold of whatever, but you can always, so to Jenna's point, you can always count on this, I'm thinking of like this number, these
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Where can you
that's,
call that you're going to reach somebody and you're going to find the support that you need? Another theme that came back when we asked our foster parents was this feeling of fault being placed on them for the children running. And them not knowing where to go with that. At some point, if you can't reach someone, you have to make a decision, right? And when you make the decision, you need to know that your county or your caseworker is going to stand behind you. And sometimes that decision is scary. I loved what Jenna said, because one of our foster parents wrote really a lot of what you said, Jenna. He said, I pack them a bag, I put it by the door, I give them a couple places that are safe to go. He said, this is a coping mechanism, and it will only build trust. This is all that he wrote. It will build trust if we allow them to run and then always say, we are here. And that, now this is a long time foster parent. This is a foster parent, a single LGBTQ foster parent who grew up in care, then was a kinship provider for all of his nieces and nephews. At one point, he had 10 kids in his home. And now he continues to foster teens. And this is not what he's been trained on. This is what his experience has told him. And it's exactly what Jenna's training.
Yeah. So Jenna, you're tapping into something there at Safi. It sounds like, so, okay, talk to me about, okay, so we've got the standard. So I'm just trying to like actually make this into something, right? Like, because we're given all these really rich ideas, and it's like, okay, so I'm hearing this like standardized support line. Like, if I'm a foster care parent, kinship provider in Colorado, regardless of where I live, I have X resource, regardless of who I'm certified by, all those sorts of things, right? Because we can't all be under Jenna's meticulous care, it sounds like, right? So,
but Jenna, how would that happen with so many different
like
police forces, like you talked about earlier?
Well, I think the support you're talking about, and I not to toot our own horns or anything, but we hear that when families transfer from counties, is we get no support. And I don't think it's county fault, I think it's lack of resources, but they really appreciate talking to one of us. It's us answering the phone, like I said, within 2 rings. If a staff didn't, we have our phones are set up so they roll to the next person. I'm always on call. So if it missed 2 other people, which it doesn't, because I don't get calls a lot, then it goes to me. So I think it's really important to look at a standard practice for a personalized number, not just a hotline number, because that's not going to get you anywhere. It sounds like counties need to establish small cohorts of people that are on call to groups of families. So when they call, and have like a hotspot system. I mean, again, I'm just speaking to what works for us and what we hear from families. And that's what it sounds like they want, is they want that real person to go, oh, you're Mrs. Smith, you have Johnny in your home. Johnny's 17 and Johnny's running. It sounds like Johnny is using meth a lot. Is that what you're worried about tonight? Yes, I'm so worried about Johnny. Okay, let's go and walk through these steps together. Okay, because you can hear when you give that over the phone at 3 a.m., they take a deep breath. Okay, I'm not in this alone. They're not mad at me. They're going to help me figure out where Johnny is. Right. So I think in a perfect world, it would be these subsets of real humans answering the call that can really give some information on your kid.
So that goes back to what Brandon was saying later. That goes to funding, right? We don't have even enough caseworkers in every slot right now in counties.
Yeah, I mean, we pay our on-call workers. It's pretty poor, and now we are required by Medicaid to do it, but I don't think that's a huge, and I could be looking at this with rose-colored glasses, a huge funding issue. To you have to have on-call. You just need to make it smaller. And again, there's ways to do it where you're just on call after hours. So you call your regular caseworker 9 to 5, and then at 5 o'clock, an on-call worker picks up so other caseworkers can shut off, because that's a big deal to our staff too. That's important. They need to go home with their families, but it's rotating, right? So I think that's one piece. The other thing, Trace, I was going to say is for standard of practice, it sounds like you said, a statewide training for foster homes and for residential facilities. Then some sort of best practices for both have to be put in there. So sounds like prevention of door alarms, lasers, that stuff is a best practice, right? And then I think we talked about this with the other subcommittee when they come back. That's that root cause analysis. Like, I think that's something that needs to be put in place, because now we have to figure out why they're running. So I think if you have kind of those layers, that's at least is a pretty good start to a recommendation of, okay, you have this robust training, you have these best practices, and then if they do run, we have a way to target why they're running and put some plans in place to hopefully prevent it from happening again. That's kind of how I'm seeing that breakdown.
Yeah, love that. Thanks. What other questions do we have or thoughts? What's coming up for folks, task force members? What are you wondering? What are you like, oh, ahas, anything? Okay. We're quiet out on the front. Yeah, there goes Stephanie, jump in.
Yeah, I think we've talked a lot about sort of what are those upfront efforts that could take place. But I'm curious, what are the issues that foster parents see when a child returns? And how do they handle those issues, and with whom?
So for us, it depends on, why the child ran. If it's drug use, we've got to do some action and safety planning, because that could be something that could lead to something fatal, right? So I think there's different plans there versus a kid trying to get to their friends for a sleepover or to family members. And so if we can figure those things out, that's a different way to kind of tackle that. I think it depends on the child's reactions to when they come home and how they're perceived when they come home. I think a big thing is, we are so glad you're home. We're not going to talk about consequences right now, and that's hard for our families because they want to give a consequence right away. We're so glad you're home. Let's just keep you safe. Let's not talk about this. Let's give it a couple days. Just stay here, right? So I think that's another big piece. And then like one kid was major safety with gang involvement. We could not keep that child in that community because the gang then knew where the foster family lived, could pick the child up and run, right? So we had to totally remove that child from that. So I know I say that a lot. It depends, but it really depends on why that child's running, and then what we can do to welcome that child back if it's safe to keep them in that environment.
Is there any sort of just kind of going back to the standardized on the training side, and I think I shared my experience of like when our teen ran versus watching them run from third way, and just the differences in how they responded, and me being like, oh, there are some parent best practices of like questions you should be asking and like safety planning you should be doing for a youth who's running who has XYZ behaviors. So is there any sort of standardized kind of response efforts in the return case for in the trainings that foster parents do receive? Do you know, like, is this is just something that we don't, right? There's no like standard protocol of like, when a kid returns to your care, you have to ask XYZ questions, you're screening this, you're doing this, you have to file this here.
I think it's just for counties, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's always notifying the caseworker. Protocol in volume 7 is you have to do a critical incident report in the system if they're gone over 24 hours. That's for CPAs. I'm not sure if that's the same for other agencies. So there's like volume 7 set protocols, but I don't think anything else that we do is standard protocol.
So is that something that feels like something that you wish would be happening, that there would be, that you see value in that sort of standard protocol piece? Or not trying to lead you to water here, I'm just kind of wondering, like, I'm hearing that there's not that. Is that something that you're like, yeah, that would be great? Or
I think standardized would be helpful, but I also think it's a paradigm shift from what, Jenna was saying. The go-to is always, there's got to be consequences for them running. So I think it's twofold. It's one, not thinking about this as yes, there have to be some sort of consequence, but what is that? Is the consequence that that's appropriate for that child in that situation or that teenager? And we go to the punishment quickly. So I think it's a paradigm shift. And I also think it's a language change. If we've got kids who are running for 2 or 3 hours, they're not running, they're taking a break, or they're, saying, I need to be away from you, or I need to go see my friends. They're doing what other kids do, and they have the extra challenge of being a kid in foster care. And so I think it's standardized, changing the perception of what they're doing. And then it is protocol. You call the caseworker, you let the guardian let them know that the kids are back. And this is what we're doing, for the next 24 hours. We're letting them sleep. They're going to go to school, whatever that is. And then we're going to have a conversation about how do we prevent this, like what's going on. So much of what we do and some of the things we're talking about today are not only putting some best practices into place, but also rethinking how we talk about these things.
Yeah, this foster parent said when kids come back to him, he tries not to worry about a consequence. He uses it as an opportunity to build trust and to explore new coping skills for the child.
Great. So, all right, y'all. I think this has been it's just been super helpful to hear, again, some Jen on the best practice side, Renee and Stacy on the what do you want, right? So I want to just we've got about 10 minutes left. And so what I would love to just hear from each of you is as just kind of a chance to just be super clear on what you think. I'm hearing the kind of coalescing around the community piece, Renee, like the connection side, which I would imagine also hits up against some red tape of privacy or something that currently exists, where it's how do I find who's doing it? That Cobbled Streets is doing some work of trying to connect people around. Do you even know who the foster parents are in your area? So clearly this is an issue, right? So there's some of their community navigators work, I know that's the thing that they're kind of focused on right now. So just kind of curious from you all of if you kind of have one charge of this is what really we need to be. It sounds like folks don't really have a ton of questions, so I'm just going to say I think people are hearing the unique challenges. So if we focus in on this the so what do you want us to really be sitting with? What do you want us to be landing with as we kind of shape up some recommendations? What would you like to see coming out of a group like this to better support foster parents as it relates to youth who have run, who did run, who might run, right? What do you want to see? Renee, I'll start with you, Stacy, and then Jenna will end with you.
Well, besides what we've already talked about, I actually saw this foster parent this past weekend, and he is in the process of switching to a CPA. And he told me that when he initially met with the CPA, the first thing he told them was, I need someone to have my back. And I think that is another thing I would add. I know I talked earlier about the perception of foster parents, and a lot of that plays into it. But foster parents and kinship caregivers need to feel like someone has their back. When they have to make really hard decisions, they need a county or a CPA that stands with them.
Thanks, Renee. Appreciate that. Adding that as the specific call out of what does this kind of advocacy and support network look like, and how do you know that you're part of that, just by default as a foster parent in the state of Colorado. Stacy, go ahead.
I think from the perspective of the kids and the teenagers, when it comes to having a relationship with the foster parents, starting with who are your people, and asking them, who's your connection, who's important to you, and hearing them, and then working together with the team to see what they can do to make those connections happen. And I think it comes down to really listening to each other, meaning the professionals, the care providers, and the kids. And so it's really at every family meeting or staffing or whatever's happening, it's listening to each other and agreeing that if the kid runs or we're trying to prevent that we have a plan when they come back. So it's really communication and listening to each other, I think.
Yeah, and I think on top of that would be how do you get them to do that, right? And so I'm going to keep going back to training and highlighting the highlighting run, because someone had said, like, you know, they're afraid to tell foster parents about these kids' behaviors. Guess what? You got to tell them everything. And if that scares them out, good, then they're not ready to be a foster parent. You can't sugarcoat that. You can't scare the complete hell out of them. Don't tell them the worst story ever, but you got to say these are the things that could happen. And if you have the education and you have the training and some protocols to follow, you're going to be able to go, okay, this is really scary. And I remember what they said, this is who I call. And then they just start doing it and they go, okay, we're getting through it together. So I keep going back to, I think all of that, Stacy and Renee, and that's, to me, is combined in a training and highlighting what AWOL is and what we can do to keep these kids. Because you're right, if you have connection in that foster home, you are less likely to run, or if you run, you're maybe taking a break and then you're willing to go, it's not so bad there. They told me they won't be mad. I'm going to come back. And that's what we want. We want them, if they are going to leave, we want them to come back. We don't want them to leave, but so that's my thought.
All right, y'all. I really appreciate just your thoughts and questions and kind of what you're wrestling with. Obviously, the work you all are doing is incredible. Jenna, sounds like you're getting a lot of love of just like, sounds like you are doing some really cool work there. And I appreciated Stephanie's question of like, you know, on the county side, like where are the bright spots? You know, it sounds like your Safety's a bright spot. And so I think the other thing I'm noticing here is like when there are bright spots, how do we find ways to like lift those up and connect folks to understand like what are these best practices? Who is doing this well? And how do we make sure that folks know about that so that we can learn from one another? Stephanie, go ahead, jump in, and then anybody else with any questions or comments.
Great, thanks, Trace. Renee, just one last question. In the very, very beginning of your comments, you indicated that foster parents have come up with their own solutions, if you will, and that you were going to share those. And I just wanted to make sure that you had the opportunity to do that. I've caught one or two of those instances, but I just wanted to make sure we exhausted that.
Yeah, I love that. That comes from this foster parent, that I've been mentioning. And a few of his things he said is to also watch for triggers or talk to the child about what their triggers are, that sometimes it's smells or words like family, or not giving enough space to the child when they're initially in their home, that boundaries are not fully understood or set, or that there are too many rules to follow. These are some of the reasons that he lists for why he thinks kids run. The number one one was that they don't have the right coping skills to handle what they're going through, and they may need a break. Don't we all, right? Also, he says kids want to know how much you will put up with and if you're really there for them. Are you going to give up the first time they act up, or even after the 7th time, 8th time? And he says, and this is true. Sometimes it might not be, it might be the foster parent. All foster parents are most foster parents are great, but some are not ready to handle these situations. Higher acuity kids should not go to a brand new foster home. They shouldn't. His suggestion is building trust, and the first thing he puts under that is be patient. Be patient with them. They are used to people giving up on them. Stick with it. How long does it take you to trust someone? He says. Now think about how long it would take for a child from trauma to learn to trust someone. And then ask what triggered them, if anything. I love his first solution is allow them to run away. Let them know the consequences of that will, if you have to notify the authorities or whatever, so that they know that. Give a time limit to come back home, or give them a time. Please be back here by whatever. Give them a watch so that they know what time it is. And then he said, give them a bag with snacks at the door. Make sure this is all age appropriate. Give them a watch, show them a couple of places in the neighborhood where they could go that is safe. And then at the end, he just writes, running is not necessarily a wrong thing to me. I feel like it's a way of coping and expressing themselves. This is not everyone, but if you allow them back in, continue to work with them, and that starts to build the trust. Help them find other coping skills, and allow them to use those coping skills. Let them know you need to know where they are for safety reasons. And if they're not safe, you have to call the authorities, but always be willing to take them back. Yeah, these are some of our foster parents that we just are so proud of.
Thanks, Renee. One just follow-up question, and I'm sorry, Teresa, I should have spoken up earlier. The task force did examine state and federal laws, and certainly, as Jenna, you've referenced, right, all the volume 7 regs as well. And it requires foster parents to follow certain protocols, such as when a kid runs, you have to call it in at a certain point, usually to the caseworker. It was a pretty simple reg, as I recall. It wasn't deeper than that. In your experience, all of you, are foster parents aware that there are like actual protocols that are supposed to be followed? And back to the issue of training, or is that just sort of a quick one sentence in the training sort of thing? I'm just trying to understand how much information is given about the actual law and regs.
Yeah, Safi does a full policy and procedure training, and we do a whole volume 7 training. We don't expect them to memorize it, but we do provide them the link, so it's always updated to say, like, always call us if you have questions, but this is your Bible, this is what you have to follow, we have to follow this. So you do have to be careful before you make big decisions. But again, they'll typically just call us because we can help walk them through it, but we definitely do trainings on that.
Thanks, Jen.
Some of I don't think in addition to maybe the training or trying to remember all the things, I do think the answers differ by county when they call their caseworker. And I think that's a challenge. So there has to be some consistency with what foster parents and kid providers are being trained through to caseworkers, not admin, to the caseworkers doing the actual work with the families. So they understand what their responsibilities are, because they have a job that I don't envy and thank them for every day. And so just reminding them that this is what the foster parent was told, this is your role in it, and then go from there. And then if I could just circle back real quick to Stephanie, your first question, and so piggybacking again off Renee. When it comes to talking to the youth that we all work with, sometimes they don't know, they don't have the words to tell you what their trigger is, and to tell you what set them off. which is why Elevating Connections, we have a robust arts program for them to use their voice. So if foster parents have some art supplies at home, and it could just be coloring pages and blank pages with markers and colored pencils, or something for them to do and say, go draw, go, maybe it'll be, maybe it will be clear, you know, maybe it'll come out in your art as to what's going on, or just go clear your mind and paint away. So having some of those alternative coping things in the home that are safe and creative. A lot comes out in art, folks. If you're not doing it, you should. So even writing or whatever, the youth I work with make me participate in the writing workshops now, and it's very helpful. So I'm just saying, adults should do it too.
Thank you all so much.
Any other questions or comments from our group before we let our folks go?
Well, and I will say what Stacy just said is right on. We always tell our foster parents, fostering is going to bring up all of your own junk. Just FYI, it's going to bring up all of your junk, and it's your job to process it to make sure it is not negatively affecting the child. So yeah, that is one reason we highly encourage our foster parents to get a therapist from the beginning, because you would be surprised what it'll bring up of your stuff.
Which is a pretty great way of wrapping around a family and wrapping around kids and making a home a safe place for them. So, because it does bring up so much for everybody, no matter how idyllic your childhood was, nobody gets out of this lifetime unscathed. And so I think it's brilliant that we say, foster parents, you don't have to have all the answers, because no parent does. And there's resources and therapy for you. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, Renee, I'll just say I try not to give too many personal anecdotes in this work for myself, but I becoming a foster parent put me in attachment therapy of my own. I was like, well, actually, you're working through some really good stuff. Maybe I should do that. So that resonates. I love that you kind of call that out around how are we caring for folks, because inevitably things are going to come up at a variety of levels for them.
Yeah, it introduced me to EMDR, which ended up being life-changing
Oh
for
yeah.
me. So
Love EMDR.
Same.
Yeah.
Life-changing.
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for a great discussion. Really, really, really appreciate your willingness to be here and just give us some things to be thinking about. This group we're going to be taking some of these ideas and hopefully turning them into some really solid recommendations, or at least discussions around where this task force was really going around it, what it would look like to better support those that are, in these positions of foster care and or kinship. So thank you so much, because we know that this is a conversation that needs to be happening more often, all the time. Appreciate the work you're doing, Stacy and Renee, particularly. I don't get to see you, so Jenna, I'll see you again, but Stacy and Renee, just really appreciate you being here with us and sharing your thoughts. We'll let you two go, and for folks on the task force, the other group will be coming back in 5 minutes. So why don't y'all take a quick 5-minute break till the 9:50, and then we'll come back. All right.
Thank you so much. Great to see you,
Thank you.
Trace.
I'm going to put my contact information in the chat in case anyone has questions. Thank you.
Great.
Bye.
Thanks so
Thank
much,
you all.
Stacy.
Good to
All right,
see you.
take care. Bye-bye. All right. Looks like the other group is coming back. Hey, Becky.
Hi, Trace. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
Good. More Grady, please.
I know, right? Right now he's fussing over there, but see if he'll
Cute.
come say hi. I'll see if he'll come say bye before we go.
Okay. We'd love it.
All right, y'all. Welcome back. I have not seen a request for public comment from a member of the public, but if there is someone on the call that would like to make public comment, we do have a few minutes.
This is Steve Fisher.
Hey, Steve, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm guessing, are there any other folks on the call besides Steve before I hand it over? All right, Steve, we've got about 4 minutes. The floor is yours. Go ahead, please introduce yourself for the record.
First, is there a way to share a screen or upload a PDF to the chat?
There should be, you could do either. It looks like you can share screen.
Okay, I'll
that's-
try that
yeah.
button when I get to it. That's helpful. Thank you. I'm Steve Fisher. I'm a civil engineer. I'm a board member of the Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health Colorado chapter. The reason I'm dialing in to these meetings is because I've lived across the street from the Tennyson Center since 1995, and I've seen hundreds of runs and rescues. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this group. So I'd like to attach some photos or share some photos of public and charter schools here in Denver. Let me just see if I can. It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Try again, Steve.
Try
Just
again.
change that.
Okay, yeah, there we go. So I'm sharing, does everyone see those photos?
Not yet, no.
Not yet. Okay, oh, I have to also hit share. There we go.
There we go.
Yeah, so this is a smattering of schools. This one happens to be in Riverside, California. It's an elementary school. A couple of views there. The reason I'm showing these is secure perimeter. Here's one. It's a charter school off Tennyson and 38th. It's a playground area. Here's the backside or front side, can't tell, of Valdez Elementary at 29th and Zuni. And this is the play area at Tennyson Center, actually, with a big opening in the fence. So I'll stop my screen sharing. Stop share. Okay. Continue on. According to some task force members, and I've read some of the minutes from the past meetings, especially Brian Kelly's nice summary of secure perimeter around the country. So according to some task force members, the trauma-informed care model means that residents and students at residential care facilities and facility schools who have behavioral issues deserve as least secure perimeter as possible. And that we need gradations of facilities with varying levels of secure perimeter. Rulebook 7 currently is silent on requiring fencing, but it also doesn't prohibit it. Secure perimeter does not create a restrictive environment. Why would the schools shown in the photos have any secure campus measures at all? In the past months, I witnessed another Timothy Montoya situation in the making. First, delay bars make an otherwise secure area unsecure. I see staff being routinely drawn out into the middle of the street negotiating with a child. In one case, staff opened the gate for the child to leave. Never mind that running away from campus is a new fight or flight trauma response precipitated by interactions with staff. To state the obvious, getting hit by a car would add trauma. The fight or flight response adds trauma. Since restraint by staff is fraught with difficulties, the only tool available to them is following, cajoling, and further agitating the child because there is no secure perimeter. Is there anything evidence-based that suggests that a secure campus induces trauma? Does a safe space induce trauma? In contrast, is there anything evidence-based that suggests that running away, exposing the child to injury, gangs, drugs, vehicles, apprehension by police, does any of that induce trauma? I hope the answer is obvious, but decades of policy seem to justify injury and death as an acceptable outcome of trauma-informed care, as it has been applied to the idea of secure perimeters. The reality is that there is no lack of trauma stacked on trauma for these kids. We are not talking about a binary of trauma or no trauma. It's a spectrum of traumas. But which one is worse, staying on the campus or being apprehended by police? Staying on the campus or being hit by a car? Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Steve. As always, appreciate your time, appreciate your thoughts here as the task force continues their work and considering recommendations. Are there any other members of the public that would like to make public comment before we close today's meeting? Okay, seeing none. Y'all really appreciate the rich discussions today in the breakout groups, subcommittees. You got a big break ahead of you. So we will be back. Or Lynette, go ahead. Sorry.
I apologize. I wanted to bring this up. I've been working for the last 2 months with the youth that is absconds from everywhere. His IQ is 49. So we're talking very IDD and also autism. And he will run into traffic. He will try to jump out of second floor windows thinking he can run away. And it is a daily, everyday event. And I learned he would even go into people's homes, and he was found in a stranger's home holding their brand newborn baby, which was clearly not safe. But I have learned that Colorado licensing statutes do not allow foster parents to use the angel sense to even be able to track them. And I think that is a travesty of justice. It puts him at such high risk, and I don't know why they're not allowed to use it. It's recommended by ABA therapists when we're dealing with the lower functioning youth. And I just wanted to bring that up as maybe a future topic to discuss.
Thank you, Lynette. Appreciate that. All right, we will make note of that comment as well for the record. And Stephanie, go ahead.
Hi, Lynette, I'm sorry. I didn't catch that last bit that you said foster parents are not allowed to use what?
The angel sense, it's a GPS tracking system for the lower functioning and IDD youth.
Great, thank you, Lynette.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, just to jump in really quick before we sign off. Do you happen to know where that provision sits in statute?
I don't know where it's at in the statute. It's in the licensing regulations. So I would reach out to Dennis Desperio.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you, Lynette. Appreciate that. Thanks for the follow-ups there to make sure we've got the right info. All right, y'all. We're 2 minutes over. This is my worst timing ever. Thanks so much for your time today. We will see you back on July 31st. I would imagine there will be some emails between now and then. So appreciate you checking your inbox and keeping up that way. Otherwise, really hope folks have a great, nearly like a month and a half until we see you again. So I'm in Arkansas enjoying the warm weather down here. So hope you all are in a sunny place as well. And we'll see you back soon. Thanks again.
Bye all. Good to see you.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.